Hi, I'm Mike Roth. I am the chair of the Harris Energy Association, which is a grad student group at the Harris School of Public Policy. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's installment of the Global Energy Series, which features acclaimed journalist Steve LeVine. The Global Energy Series is presented by the Center for International Studies and co-sponsored by the Program on the Global Environment and the Environment, Agriculture, and Food Working Group. Through its lectures, films, and discussions, Global Energies offers a public inquiry into the ecology, science, and politics of energy in the 21st century. Due to an earlier postponement, there will be one final talk of this series, and it's going to be energy expert and scientist Dan Kamen, who's going to join us in autumn 2014 to offer his Theory of Energy Access talk. Please visit globalenergies.uchicago.edu for updates and more information. This evening, we are privileged to hear from Steve LeVine, a talk entitled Smog, Natural Gas, Batteries, and the New Geopolitics of Energy. Steve LeVine is an accomplished journalist and author who currently serves as Washington correspondent for Quartz, a new website on economics and business launched by the Atlantic Media Company. He is also a Shorts Fellow and the New America Foundation Washington at the New America Foundation Washington, and an adjunct professor at Georgetown University School of Foreign Affairs, where he teaches energy and security. Steve previously was correspondent for Central Asia and the caucus for the Wall Street Journal and New York Times for 11 years. Before that, he was correspondent in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and before that, the Philippines. His first book was The Oil and the Glory, a history of the former Soviet Union through the lens of petroleum and big geopolitics. His second book, Putin's Labyrinth, profiled Russia through the lives and deaths of 6 Russians. His current project, about which we will hear today, examines the geopolitics of technology and the race among nations for a breakthrough in advanced batteries. And now, please join me in welcoming Steve LeVine.
Thanks very much for having me. Thanks for the invitation. I'm actually not going to discuss my new book tonight, by the way. But we have a title. It was just named this week. The Powerhouse is the name of the book. And it will come out next February. And one of the main actors in the book is sitting in the back row right there. Mike Thackeray with his wife, Lisa. I hope that I don't embarrass you tonight. I also have a friend, Bob Ames, from the old days in Kazakhstan. If you find that I've lied, you can speak up. So what I am going to talk about tonight, so what I do, my thing is I don't follow energy as an endpoint. I don't really care about energy, only to the extent when it affects geopolitics. So what I'm going to do tonight is I want to take you through what the world looks like, what global geopolitics looks like through the lens of energy, and how you can, if you follow energy that way, you can understand a lot more what's happening and what's going to happen next. And I'm also going to do something new. So I teach a course in this at Georgetown, and what we do is, of course, energy prices go up, energy prices go down. A rig explodes in the Niger Delta. A bunch of people are kidnapped. Russia invades Ukraine. So we get a lot of events every single day. So 1,000 such changes every day. Which are the ones that rise to the level of affecting geopolitics? That's the trick. That's the trick. And then once you think that an event rises to the level of affecting geopolitics, how How is it going to affect geopolitics? So the thing that I'm going to do tonight that I haven't done before is I want to take you into the system. It's something that I do in the classroom in Georgetown, but I'm going to try this out, see how it works, how many of you fall asleep. But you really got to listen because it gets quite technical. So the first thing that I want to do is just give an example of how this works. George Mitchell died just a few months ago, 91 years old, invented hydraulic fracturing, the system that has created the shale gas and the shale oil revolution and shaken up geopolitics, well, shaken up the economy here and shaken up geopolitics. Started right there in Fort Worth, Texas, where he drilled for 20 years, 25 years with no luck, and then finally figured out how to inject water at very high pressure underneath the shale, in the shale of Fort Worth, Texas, and created the gushers that we know today. And undermined Vladimir Putin in Europe, in Russia. So the question is, how is it that an event, the drilling of natural gas underneath the Fort Worth airport, by the way, had this impact to undermine Putin in Europe, 5,800 miles away? So the main thing to understand is that, which we've been seeing in the news every day for the last few months, is that Russia has this stranglehold on the supply of natural gas into Europe. So these are the states in 2006 and in 2009. Russia cut off the natural gas supply into Ukraine, and that had the ongoing impact of cutting off 30% of the natural gas supply into Europe. And the dark brown are the states that rely on 100% in some cases, if it's the Baltics and Finland, and then 75, 90%, and then so on. Here we go. Here, in the year 2008, 6 European states relied on Russian gas 100% of their natural gas supply, and 6 more relied on the Russian natural gas for over half. So when you had that cutoff, you really impacted Europe. It was in the dead of winter, and you can see that not just a cutoff, but a threat of a cutoff can have a political impact, and this is where Russia exerted its influence in Europe. Hold on to that. We had this twin event contemporaneous to that, and that was that 2005, 2006, up to 2008, the U.S. thought that it was gas short. U.S. was running out of natural gas, and companies had applied for and received permits to establish 16 LNG, liquefied natural gas terminals on both coasts, and then plus on the Gulf of Mexico, to start taking in a lot of LNG from abroad, chiefly Qatar, into the United States, starting about 2010. And a lot of investment went into that. Tens of billions of dollars went into the calculus that the United States was gas short and that it required enormous shipments of imports of natural gas from abroad. And in fact, Gazprom opened up an office in Houston, and with the aim of taking over 10% of the U.S. natural gas supply. And you had George Mitchell, rolling back to George Mitchell on the first slide, revolutionizes hydraulic fracturing. explosion of natural gas supply in Texas, the idea catches fire, and all of those purple and pink ovals and areas around the country, and then into Canada, drilling started, fracking started in all of those places. And then suddenly, the United States was not only not gas short, it had this enormous surplus. So you can see here, that area, that blue area at the top in 2007, 2008, this narrow strip, and then starting 2009, 2010, you have this enormous supply coming onto the market. U.S. no longer needed the natural gas, but the LNG still existed. Exxon and Qatar had invested tens of billions of dollars in developing natural gas field, the North Field, offshore Qatar, the plants to freeze it into LNG, QMAX, these enormous tankers to ship all that to the United States. They weren't going to sit on that. They diverted it. All that gas that was supposed to come into the United States went to Europe. Undermining Russia. So this is how the discovery, George Mitchell's discovery of natural gas underneath the Fort Worth airport undermined Vladimir Putin's position, Russia's position. It's sort of extortionate power in Europe, and that's a primary example that we see before our eyes of how geopolitics of energy works. An event, the discovery of a new supply can shake up events very, very far away. So, just to get a little bit broader about this, so you can see the whole picture. It's not just shale gas; it's oil too. This is the boom in oil, shale oil, and offshore. It's offshore Gulf of Mexico oil by 2020. This is a forecast by Citigroup. Is that North America altogether, Canada, the United States, and Mexico all together are going to move from, you can see 2011 in 9 years, from drilling collectively 15 million barrels a day to 27 million barrels a day. And South America, the new petrostates of French Guiana, Suriname, and perhaps Guyana. Offshore, deep offshore Angola. The new petrostate of Mozambique, Somalia, Ethiopia. These are new finds in places that just a few years ago were not imagined, and that now, in the coming years, if they play it right, have a real chance to turn around the lives and the economies of those places. Israel, the old story we know. If Moses had only turned left and not right, the Jews would have ended up with the oil. Well, now natural gas has been discovered in great volumes offshore the East Mediterranean, and it's offshore Cyprus too. This has the potential to trigger geopolitical impact. So all of this together is the scenario of the geopolitics of plenty. Right? So, for those who have been, just reading the newspaper casually, over the last, 5, 7, 8 years, it wasn't that long ago when the main narrative was peak oil. We're all going back to the forest, resource war. The new narrative is geopolitics of plenty, and it's a narrative that's built on the back of of those finds that I just described and more. And you can see where these ovals are. These are some of the places where you get the cascading impact, the chain reaction. So you get, if the abundance narrative holds, then you get undermining of, you get OPEC undermined because the price that the price of oil that OPEC nations, that most of the OPEC nations require to run the governments to make their social spending, especially since the Arab Spring, is undermined. Instead of receiving $100 a barrel, $110 a barrel, as we'll see later, they'll be getting $80 a barrel, $90 a barrel. Suddenly they don't have the money to support themselves. One of the negative effects, if you have all of this, right, in low-priced oil, low-priced gas, you're burning a lot of hydrocarbons. The incentive for reducing the burning of fossil fuels is reduced, and you get, you get a reversal of attempts to cap greenhouse gases, the emission of greenhouse gases. In the United States, the scenario is a renaissance of manufacturing, manufacturing renaissance. That the decline, again, the other narrative that we hear so much about, U.S. decline, geopolitical decline in isolation and relative to China is reversed, and the United States is back on the march. And China, it's a good story. The scenario of abundance is a good story for China because much of the description of resource war and friction and so on with China is because China is worried, is it going to have enough oil, enough natural gas to fuel its economic expansion, to fuel the creation, the ongoing creation of its middle class and so on. Well, if you have so much oil, you have so much natural gas, it's a lot less worried. And furthermore, and here we get into the geopolitics of smog. That smog that we're seeing, or that we're not seeing anything else but the smog in the most populous cities in China. If you have a world in which there's a lot more natural gas and the price of natural gas drops, China is encouraged to use more natural gas to produce its electricity. If Mike Thackeray in the back finally gets off his butt and invents the new battery that we need, he's really taking it hard. Then all those new cars that will be on China's roads, a lot of them will be using batteries charged up by electric power stations burning natural gas, and suddenly China becomes a lot cleaner than we see today. So how do we get there? When you read forecasts in the paper about what we just saw, 36 hours ago we read the Financial Times had a scoop. China rejects the new natural gas deal with Gazprom, with Russia. Putin is in Shanghai. Everything we're hearing after the 3 months of the invasion of Ukraine, this new Cold War with the West, Putin is going to turn it around by signing this big natural gas deal with China, his own pivot to Asia, this big story, failure, Putin failure. 6 hours later, new headline, you have this deal. What happened? What happened in those 6 hours? The analyses that we're seeing since, who did Russia blink? Did China blink? What does the deal mean? What does the deal mean for Ukraine? What does it mean for the United States? What does it mean for Europe? What does it mean for China? How do we get there? I have a transparent system for getting there. This is the point that I ask you to focus, because I'm going to sort of rush through this. Those those hundreds and thousands of events, energy events that you read about, that you see about. What is an energy event? Energy event, gas prices going up, down, again, explosion of a pipeline. Any big event involving a petrostate, the invention of a new technology for drilling, and so on. These are energy events. If what you're reading about has any of these 15 components in it, and especially if it's numerous of these components, there is the potential for geopolitical impact. These are not predictive. These are indicators. It's what Nate Silver called separating the signal from the noise. This is how you hear the signal from all that noise of all of those events. For example, the third personality. If Dmitry Medvedev was still president of Russia, would he have invaded Crimea? We can't predict, but there's certainly a doubt. The point is that in an event, when you have a big personality, like Churchill, if Churchill was not prime minister of Great Britain, would Great Britain have been able to hold out as long as it did before the United States came into the war? The presence of a big personality in an event can change everything, and when you see one, it makes it worth checking out to see if there's going to be a geopolitical impact. An analog to that, second from the bottom, mountains. There are certain countries that are worth watching when they're in an event because they have a propensity to have geopolitical impact. And the two qualities that make up a mountain that I call it, there are countries and they are entities. These are the qualities that they have are size. They're large, so they can change events if they choose, but they also have a record of moving outside of the lanes, of taking actions that go outside normal, what is generally regarded as normal behavior, so that they can create and disrupt trends. And examples of mountains are Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, a company, ExxonMobil, the United States. An example of who is not a large country that is not a mountain, Kazakhstan. What's another country that has a lot of oil but doesn't change events? Norway. Right? You would have absolutely no fear if something happens with Norway with a dispute with one of its neighbors, that suddenly you're going to have an invasion and oil prices are going to go through the roof. So these are one of the most powerful indicators of geopolitical impact. Right in the center, public opinion. Energy has an outsized impact on making people really angry. Yeah, and this has then can have public policy impact. So when you have an event in which people might get or do get really, really angry, we focus on that. Okay, but that's not all we do. So we decide, we've got a few of these, we see some event, we've got a few of these things, say, okay, we're going to take a look at this event, we're going to see if we're going to have geopolitical impact, and we get to the rules. And we'll apply rules. Now, what are the rules? Rules of geopolitics are, what I did was, so I spent 18 years as a foreign correspondent, and And over that time, then one develops internally your own sort of guideposts for how you're analyzing what you're seeing before your eyes, so you can inform your readership back home what's going on and what you think is going to go on. And what I did when I started out the course, the director of the program, so I teach in the Security Studies program, the School of Foreign Service, and the director of the program, you got to systematize this. Everyone, you can't teach in tuition. You have to teach a set of rules. So these are the rules, and what these are sort of my guideposts, and I think they're right for how things generally happen. Right? They don't. Someone's going to raise their hand and say, "Hey, that's not right because," right? Some example. This is, generally the case. I'll just go through these very, very fast. Generally speaking, countries muddle along. Yeah? The Philippines has been going over the precipice and going to collapse for 40 years. Generally, countries do not. We call them failed states. They don't disappear. Generally, they muddle along. Precipice rule. This is a corollary. Actors and countries, when they face going over a precipice, generally do not go over it. Sometimes they do, but generally they stop. They'll shout, scream, wave their arms, and threaten bloody murder, but they stop just before plummeting into the abyss. The conspiracy rule. Generally, there aren't any. We're prone to forecasting, to seeing the worst in an event, seeing dark shadows, forecasting dark things. There are conspiracies; they do exist, but generally, almost never. Number 4, this is the biggest driver, the largest driver of geopolitics on the frontier in the emerging world. When there is sort of a turning point, a tipping point, when people feel injustice, a threat to the health and to their own economic well-being, especially involving their children. You can get a big geopolitical impact. That's the pivot point in the Arab Spring. The idea rule, way exaggerated. The ideas like democracy and so on almost never are the pivot point in an event. Sometimes ideas are, but as I say, almost never. Caesar rule. If no other rule applies, you can have a ruler who is upended by palace coup, defection, assassination, staying in power rule. The first rule of politics, everywhere you go around the world, what does every politician, from the city council all the way up to the president, every country in the world want? To stay there. There's a big driver of events. Territory rule. Smartest, most reasonable people you know, who you regard as unflappable, will go berserk over a threat to a sliver of territory that they, of their own country or a country that they feel close to. Rule of averages. This is that you get really, really extreme behavior, countries and people within the countries behaving crazy. As with everything else, in the cycle of events, countries and events tend toward the average. They tend to calm down, and one country where we're seeing that is Iran right now. And the big personality rule we've already covered. The true believer rule. This rule can cancel out everything else if you get a place where the driving force is a messianic feeling, like Putin. Putin. Mountain rule. We already covered what a mountain is. When you get to the rules, the corollaries: future superpower China, former superpower Russia, perceived Iran. Getting rich rule, again, sometimes, a lot of times, what you're seeing in front of your face is someone just feeding at the trough or wanting to feed at the trough. Local politics. This is it is a rather than finding big driving, global driving dynamics in what you're seeing before your eyes. Very, very often, what you need to know to understand an event is look at what's happening locally. And finally, did I get it? Nope. That's it. That's it. Okay. Example. Let's apply the rules to Yanukovych. Okay, I'm just going to do this once, and then you can stop being bored. Okay. Indicators. Which indicators catch our eye in the events before Yanukovych fled? So big personality, Putin, corruption, local politics, public opinion. Why are all those people on the Maidan? Chaos, right? All of this, right? All the fighting and killing, and all of them involve a mountain. This is an event, a classic event that we ought to look at because it could have geopolitical impact. So what rules? Okay, what rules apply that will tell us? Because even if you have all those indicators, you aren't necessarily going to have an impact. We need to look at the rules. Let me insert another Nate Silver point here. How many people here are familiar with Signal and the Noise, the book? Or just familiar with Nate? So one of Nate's main messages is you can have an algorithm, but you can't rely 100% on that algorithm. This is the mistake that a lot of data folks make, is it looking myopically at their data and failing to look out of the window at what's going on in front of their face. So you look at the indicators, you look at the rules, but in the end, you've got to rely on your own judgment, the life you've led, your understanding of events, and insert yourself into the equation. So here we start the whys. Why are these events happening? It's the economic health injustice rule. That's why everyone is on the Maidan. And then what about the other side? Yanukovych, he wants to stay in power. What's this all about? Local politics. Rule of averages might apply. We'll look at it. The Caesar rule might apply, right? Someone could do Yanukovych in. The precipice rule applies, right? Does one side, does the other side, are they willing to go over the precipice? And the lens we'll use in this case, right? This very, very tense case, or eyeball to eyeball. This is where the tire hits the road in the Arab Spring. And in this case, too, are protesters willing to die? And if they are, are the folks in power willing or unwilling to mow them down? This is why is Assad still in power and Mubarak is not? Right? All right, we get rid of the rule of averages. The events have not advanced enough that we can say that the extremes are going to calm down and they're going to find some kind of compromise in the middle. So we have left these ones in red, and then a precipice rule. The protesters are willing to take a bullet. We saw this, right? Because Yanukovych, the snipers, shot down dozens of the folks in Maidan, and they stayed out there. He was unwilling to mow them down. So we take out two. We take out the precipice rule. We take out the rule of averages. We have the stay in power rule. So he wants to stay in power. He's not willing to mow them down. So how's he going to stay in power? Well, can he strike a deal? No, he can't strike a deal. The folks on the Maidan not willing to strike a deal. So you have left two, local politics, and you have the Caesar rule. Local politics, totally out of control. Caesar rule doesn't look like no one did Yanukovych in. It didn't look like he lost that kind of support. How's he going to stay in power? All those folks in the street, local politics look negative, but he is afraid. No one's done him in, but he fears someone could do him in. And in fact, as soon as he left, remember, the whole Rada, the parliament, voted to expel him as president. So he flies. So the probability in that case of flight. So that's how you do it. That's how you do it in that case. All right. So I used these rules last year, 2013. I was 5 out of 6 using the rules to forecast events. I forecast them in January, and so these are the forecasts for 2014. I'm already looking bad, but I was also looking bad by this time last year. So I'm not going to panic yet, but I forecast that that there is an Iran deal. Iran and the West do sign a deal. Here's where it really gets shaky, but I'm sticking with it, and I'll tell you why. Iran and Russia take a larger, more constructive role in global crises. Now, it looks like Putin is going absolutely the other way, right? He's going rogue and not playing a constructive role on the world stage. I see that, think of it this way. November 2012, Obama wins re-election, 53% of the vote. Remember what the newspaper said about what his next 4 years were going to be like, what his agenda, the potential for his agenda, how it was going to be for the Democratic Party. Right? Everything was green light. Right? Within weeks, he was toast, and then you had the healthcare fiasco. So I think Putin's at his peak. Putin peaked with Crimea and the disruption in eastern Ukraine and the election that's going to go his way on Sunday and his deal with China. And let's see how it goes after this. I'm totally open. We should exchange emails after that. So I'm going to stick with that one. Pandemonium for Syria, continued pandemonium in Syria and Iraq. Same in the South China Sea, but they don't go to war. Vietnam and the Philippines, for example, do not go to war with China. The U.S. is considering exporting oil for several reasons, but the main reason is to undermine Putin. But these are the forecasts. By the way, all of this is online. The indicators, if you Google Quartz, who I work for, and my name and the forecast, all the indicators, the rules, spelling out the rules, and these forecasts, they're all online. All right. What makes it? What are the challenges in doing that? In using a systematized approach to examining global events. What are the dynamics? We live in the most turbulent age for energy since Rockefeller 140 years ago. More countries involving more energy and more players are involved, and have something at stake than ever before. So a lot of moving parts. Let's go through it. All right, so I'm going to play out now. I'm going to play out these two competing scenarios. All right, so this is the abundance scenario, just digging a little bit deeper into the scenario that we talked about in the beginning. So, folks who abide by the abundance scenario, they look at the United States and Canada, and they see that by the year 2020, they together are producing 20 million barrels a day of oil, but that the consumption, demand for oil, that black line, drops. It drops down to about 17 million barrels a day, leaving 3 million barrels a day surplus. Suddenly, the United States not only is not importing oil, it has 3 million barrels a day surplus. North America as a whole, including Mexico, 27 million barrels a day of oil in 2020. On top of supply, then you have huge demographic changes. Americans are driving a lot less. So you see here this line starting. So it starts, that first year is 1998, and the last one is 2020. That the steep one, the darker line, are miles driven, and then that more curved line, that's specifically the age group 20 to 59, and you can see that the miles driven per year is projected to fall from 12,400 to 11,600. What we're seeing is that young people are waiting a lot longer to get their driver's licenses. When they get their driver's licenses, they're not buying a car. When they buy a car, they're driving it a lot less. And instead of showing off for the young men, instead of showing off with their ride, they're showing off with their iPhone. Right? The whole culture, social culture, has changed. This is an energy event with geopolitical impact. This again is from Citibank. So this is global oil demand. If business just continues as usual, so if you look at the forecasts of the International Energy Agency, Exxon, BP, all of them, they have business as usual, 98 million barrels a day. So right now, the world consumes 90. So that's roughly a 10% increase by the year 2020. But what Citicorp forecasts is that efficiency gains. So cars now get on average 27 miles per gallon. By the year 2025, they're getting 54 miles per gallon, plus those demographic changes. And then that because of the natural gas surplus that we have, that this surplus pushes itself into the market. This is sort of, it's a tendency that a lot of people have trouble getting their arms around. That usually people think demand creates supply. Right? People demand something, so supply is created. Well, supply also creates demand. What came first, the Medellin cartel or enormous demand for cocaine in the United States? Right? So that huge supply of, or the ready supply of cocaine in Colombia, and shoving it into the United States at whatever price, created the level of demand in the United States. And in the same way, natural gas in great surplus, according to Citibank, and I happen to agree with it, is going to push itself into the U.S. market in very, very surprising ways. So natural gas-driven vehicles, LNG and CNG-driven vehicles, are going to, over the next 10 or 15 years, become much more prevalent. And for the same reason why the forecasts for China's consumption of natural gas are way, way low. China, staying in power rule. China's Communist Party wants to stay in power. That's one fact. The other fact, if it doesn't clean up its air, health, in the health rule, health of the children, people in the streets, instability, and a threat to the Communist Party. Therefore, the Communist Party will clean up its air, which means that it needs to start burning a lot less coal, it needs to burn a lot more natural gas, and it needs to buy the cars that Mike Thackeray's batteries are going to power. So that's it, and you can see that gray line. That is the forecast. That's the Citibank forecast, that basically consumption stays pretty much where it is right now. The impact of this, right? So you have surplus, a growing surplus, and then you have demand staying the same, right? Law of supply and demand. That top arrow, real global oil prices fall by 14%. The base case from Citibank is that global oil prices now at $110 a barrel fall to $85 to $95 a barrel. The break-even point that a lot of the OPEC nations need to run their governments, to keep their folks happy, that Russia needs, Venezuela, Iran, that all of them need to keep their folks happy, it varies, but it's a lot higher than that. For Russia, it's $117 a barrel. So this is a forecast for mayhem among petrostates. However, there's another scenario out there, right? There's a scenario, there's the scarcity scenario, status quo scarcity scenario. Okay. So a host of other also very smart people, Barclays Bank, International Energy Agency, and others say that yes, it is true that the forecasts for U.S. supply are going through the roof, but other non-OPEC countries, their supply are going through the floor. And that if you balance out the rise and the plunge, you end up basically in the same place. In addition, the forecast for what OPEC needs to produce itself by the year 2020, the growth in OPEC production that's required, that is thought to be required to meet projected oil demand, is not going to be met. That, instead of producing the whole, they call it the call on OPEC, OPEC only produces 60% of that volume, and that narrows this quotient out there that's called spare capacity. This is the amount of excess productive facilities, ready facilities that petrostates have in a pinch to produce oil if it's needed. So it's demand plus a little margin. And when you don't have a margin, and then you have the Russians invading Ukraine, oil prices go through the roof. This forecast is that margin shrinks to this very, very narrow band, and that causes oil prices to go back through the roof. This one here, we'll get to exactly that slide, but this one here is it's showing that, okay, so we don't have enough oil out there, then we should just pour more money in. We should drill more, and we'll just get more supply. This is forecasting that once you get to 30 billion barrels, when the price of oil goes up to 100, 120, 140, 160, it starts having only a marginal impact, a marginal increase in supply. So you can't, in other words, you can't drill your way out of it. This is what that slide is saying. Another part of the scarcity quotient is that, yes, it is true that the U.S. shale revolution has caused and will continue to cause U.S. oil supply to go through the ceiling until the year 2021, and then it's going to have a slow decline. This forecast is based on current technology. The tension here is that the scarce scenarists, I've got 5 minutes. I've got to go through this fast. The scarcity scenarists make their forecasts based on current technology, and the abundance say, technology has always come to the rescue, and it will this time too. In the year 2020, remember Ed Morse at Citibank, $85. In the year 2020, the scarcity guys say double that, $158. Who's right? We don't know who's right, and that's what makes it difficult to do the kind of forecasting that we pointed out in earlier. Let's go back to Russia. So what we're watching the events today. What's different now from the crisis of 2009? European countries, almost none of Europe's nations now rely on Russia for 100% of their supply. Over the last 4 or 5 years, they've managed to find other supply. They're still highly reliant, but less reliant. Natural gas, LNG, is coming on stream from Canada, from the United States. The idea is to ship that into Asia. This is a big impact to the degree low price U.S. natural gas. U.S. natural gas is $4 a thousand cubic feet. LNG in Asia is $16. Yeah? So to the degree U.S. LNG goes into Asia, it's going to undercut gas there, creating more demand and potential geopolitical impact. But what we saw over the last 24 hours, Putin with his jujitsu has this gas and pipeline supply deal shoving by the year 2018, 38 billion cubic meters a year into China. So you've got gas coming from one side, and then you've got gas coming from the other side. They are rivals for the same market. And then this is the last slide, by the way. And so the interesting thing for me, how do we read? Just thinking, how do we read the events that we're watching in China, in Russia, and Ukraine over the last 24 to 36 hours? We can talk about that. It's very, very early untangling it. But one thing that's interesting for me is that China has managed over the last month or so to create two very, very large pieces of facts on the ground, to capture two very important moments. This is, for those who don't recognize this is in the South China Sea. China CNPC sent out a drilling ship into Vietnamese waters and put down a drill into a portion of the South China Sea that Vietnam claims as its own. Vietnam sent out 26 warships. China sent out 71 warships. They started ramming each other, and China firing this water cannons. This is China declaring a much broader part of the South China Sea as its own. And then we saw over the last 24 hours China connecting itself through infrastructure to Russia, but also by extension, it connects itself directly into Ukraine, into Europe, into the whole equation, the Western Russian equation. China becomes the central actor in these two big events. Thanks very much. Let's have a discussion about that.
There is no time for questions. We ask that you line up and speak to this microphone for the sake of our recording.
That's the opposite of asking questions.
So I noticed that you omitted from your talk discussion about renewables and nuclear, and I was wondering how you feel they play into geopolitics.
Yeah. Well, they need to get into the game. So let's say, for example, that Japan, Abe has announced that he wants to reverse the ban on the use of nuclear power and turn back on the power plants. If he actually did that in itself would change the whole equation in Ukraine and Europe, because suddenly Japan, being the largest purchaser of LNG on the planet, all that LNG, most of it is from Qatar. That Qatari natural gas would then swing into Europe. Europe would suddenly have all of this supply and be a lot less afraid to stand up to Russia. So nuclear does have a big part to play. It's expensive. It's really expensive. Renewables, most of the renewables have not proven themselves. Biofuels, in my view, will not get into the game. They're just too expensive. And then the size of the market, they're always going to be niche. It really is the biggest potential game changer is the battery. So we really are waiting for that big technological change, but everyone's betting against it, right? So there's a lot of hype, and hope starting in about 2008, 2009. A lot of money from the Obama administration went into the construction, into investment of research in batteries. There's malaise right now that we didn't get there. A lot of the plants failed. Some of them went bankrupt. So you've got Exxon, most of the oil companies forecasting no big breakthrough in batteries before the year 2040. That's an enormous bet, right? So 20 for a quarter of a century. The bet is that the physics are so hard that there's no. But it's even worse than that. Elon Musk, his whole thing, Tesla, is a bet against the battery. The Tesla S and the Roadster and the new models run off the-shelf Panasonic batteries that are engineered well into these cars, and his idea is through economies of scale to make his automobiles cheaper, to create a mass market. A bet that the battery guys won't eclipse him by creating a much more efficient battery that would make his gigafactory, the one that he wants to open, go bankrupt. Yes, sir.
There's several things. One, it looks to me like what you need is, in some sense, a big input-output model to do sensitivity analysis with. But secondly, I read Clean Tech, the website, that they have 2 or 3 explorations in battery technology, probably a day. what the question, and it'd be good to ask Musk, is how much, if you maintain a lithium battery but have more effective electrodes, can he convert? But finally, you mentioned battery is the big possible game changer. What if people really begin to take seriously that we can't burn more than 20% of their known reserves in fossil fuels? What's the chance for mass government action, either piecemeal or global, that could change the equation by saying, sorry, you can't take it all out?
Yeah. I'm going to take those in reverse order. Okay. So first on the point of do people say I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore? I don't think so. I think that it seemed that those were the politics a few years ago, especially at the time Obama came into power in 2009. That's the way it seemed. That was the betting. But those aren't the politics anymore. And well, so you can get right. So you can get two things, right? So you are having 9 states that are creating their own facts on the ground by requiring a certain percentage of zero emission vehicles on the road by 2025. That could take fire. And the other point is that the United States emission of greenhouse gases have plunged since the financial crisis, and this is some part of that is the drop in GDP because of the financial crisis, but it's also these changed demographics, and some people think that it won't go all the way back. And the other thing are the new politics in China, that China cannot burn as much oil and as much coal as is baked into the forecasting models because the Communist Party of China wants to stay in power. We may see this, but if that happens, I mean, you can see that these are actions happening of their own accord. It's not a mad as hell scenario. And so I just don't believe that's going to happen. Well, okay, let's take that part of your question afterward. We'll talk about it. But the first part, Tesla, Musk. I asked Musk himself I asked him about the technology that Argonne National Lab is using, and he thinks it's the wrong technology. It's the wrong formulation, and he's going to stick with his Panasonic batteries. He's using this engineering solution, and that's the way that he's going to do it. And just to close this out, I was in Palo Alto 2 days ago, and you do see, you see every single day there's another company whose technology comes on, and they're going to revolutionize the world, and it's a bunch of, almost totally, it's a bunch of hype. It really is.
No, there's going to be no magic solution.
Yeah.
The question is incremental improvements.
Let's talk after. Okay. Sir.
So, given that we have a big problem in addressing climate change, and one of the proposed solutions is a carbon tax, but that's something that would have to be done if it was feasible on a global scale, how do you think the feasibility of something like that is, maybe in regards to your framework, ever getting done?
Yeah. No, a carbon tax, we put a price on something, then suddenly people start paying attention. Exxon has a carbon tax built into its forecast. It expects there to be a carbon tax. I don't. I mean, I guess it's because of our politics. Here we're just there aren't the politics that are going to result in a new tax, and especially this tax that will hit this kind of a tax that will hit people every time they fill up their tanks. But again, you can get the same impact just of its own accord. I actually think that the nightmare scenarios of climate change, you do have a nightmare, right, as we're watching before our eyes, in the form of extreme weather, in the form of the melting of the ice caps and so on. But the most apocalyptic scenarios don't happen because of their own accord. The most extreme rises in temperature do not happen, and the reasons again for that are what I already spelled out. For example, China staying in power rule. Almost all of the forecast increase in greenhouse gases over the next 25 years, and the scenario is that you get the steep increase until the year 2025, and then it starts to decline. Is that instead of you do get an increase, but it's that ascent is much less, and it's because of the politics. Yeah. Sir.
You have the Caspian Sea. There's about 5 nations scramble to develop the gas reserves offshore, the oil, and then to have to transport it through very unstable terrain in Azerbaijan, Georgia. Do you see, you've spent time in Central Asia, have you heard anything or spent any time thinking about how that coming through Turkey, coming back up to these nations quickly into Europe that are very highly dependent, as your map showed, on Russian gas, could that be a game changer? Can that alter the landscape in any way?
You meaning more gas coming from, or
coming out of the Caspian, yeah.
Getting cut. It was hoped, but no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, what's going to happen in the short term is that the gas will continue. So the gas coming from Azerbaijan into Europe is 10 BCM. It's this tiny volume. But there are volumes of oil, for example, coming out of Kazakhstan across Russia. This is how Putin is going to continue to make people listen to him by fiddling with that pipeline, the CPC pipeline, which he's done over the years. But what you didn't mention is Iran. You get an Iranian deal with the West, and suddenly all those oil and gas companies that are currently camping out in Tehran get a deal. And incidentally, the largest natural gas field in the world, Qatar, that north field, the other half of that field is offshore Iran. They call it South Pars. It's exactly the same field. And Total has wanted to drill that for a long time, and suddenly you get all that gas onto the global market and oil. And that's the biggest potential energy-driven game changer of all. That changes geopolitics from soup to nuts. In the tension area, just politics, local politics, regional politics, and energy. Yeah. Let's take something from the back. Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure I follow how you're claiming the battery is going to be the game changer. The battery doesn't really generate anything. So it's really a bet on electricity, which is either a bet on natural gas, coal, uranium, renewables. So I'm trying to understand kind of how you see that mix geopolitically with respect to a potential battery.
Yeah, absolutely. I will make you a believer. So what is the problem with solar and wind? We have this revolution also in the economics of solar and wind, that when there's no sun, when there's no wind, right? And you have to have base load. That's why you have to keep needing natural gas. You have to keep needing coal. Well, if suddenly you can economically store that wind and that solar, then suddenly you rid yourself of the requirement for base load. So that's on the side of electricity generation. On the side of our major source of consumption of oil, cars. Here in the United States, not all over the world, but here it's that we drive cars. So we require 10 million barrels a day of oil to drive those cars. Well, if those cars don't require that oil, but instead they are either partly or wholly going on electricity, and that electricity, now this scenario that I'm laying out is natural gas, which is the trend, that natural gas created electricity. Natural gas creates a lot less greenhouse gases than oil, than does coal, and so you're burning. You're creating. So you have a big impact on climate change and on extreme weather. Not using that oil, suddenly you're producing the oil, but the demand for the oil drops, and so the price of oil drops. Again, geopolitical impact for the reasons that I have stated before, because of the petrostates that Russia, OPEC, and so on that rely on a certain high price of oil for their well-being. No, it's a game changer. You can parse whether you regard that impact, the latter impact, as a positive or a negative impact, whether the collapse of OPEC is positive or negative, what it will do, the disruption in the Middle East, but it's an impact, big impact.
And in fact, we heard a lecture by a professor of engineering at Cornell 2 months ago that said that the methane emissions in that surrounding natural gas was 3 to 4 times larger. It was actually possibly worse than coal.
Yeah. So, what I'm telling you, I'm not advocating something, right? I'm telling you what I think is happening, and what in my view is manifest, and so one can desire and hope for renewables to do what they need to do to break into the market and take control of the power that we need to run the economies, that the global economies require. But it's a long way to getting there. That's what I'm saying. And so, I'm not, I'm hearing from the intonation is, hey, but that's not what we want, but that's another topic.
Why is it such a long way? I mean, if we invested more in it, it might not be such a long way.
Well, we have to talk about the politics and the Koch brothers and the influence of the fossil fuel companies now.
We have time for one more.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about that at the end? We're not on different. What I can tell you is we're not on different pages. But it's another topic. Yes, sir.
I just want to know if hydrogen belongs in this conversation.
Hydrogen fuel cells.
Given Toyota's comment the other day.
Yeah. So hydrogen fuel cells are part of the zero emissions requirement. Not just Toyota, but GM and across the board, the car makers are creating between the years 2015 and 2018 fuel cell driven cars. And they're very, very expensive because they use platinum in the process of creating the hydrogen. But again, if they get there, then yeah, that's also a technology that can shake things up. Thank you very much. I'm going to be around if anyone wants to talk afterward.